It all started with me doing what I thought was the right thing, working hard to give my wife, Sarah, the life she deserved. I was on the road a lot, trying to secure deals that would keep us comfortable. I wasn't thrilled about being away from home for weeks at a time, but we both knew it was temporary. Or at least, I thought we both knew that. Last month, I wrapped up a business deal ahead of schedule. It was one of those rare moments when everything clicked, and I managed to shave 2 whole days off my trip. I decided not to tell Sarah. I thought it'd be a romantic surprise to come home early and spend the weekend together. Looking back, maybe that was my first mistake. Surprises only work when the person on the other end isn't a lying cheat. I walked through the front door around 10 p.m. Our house was quiet, but I noticed the faint glow of the bedroom light spilling into the hallway. I figured Sarah had left it on and fallen asleep watching TV or reading one of those romance novels she loved. I was grinning like a fool as I climbed the stairs, excited to see her face light up when I walked in. But as I reached the top, I heard something that made my heart stop. A low, muffled laugh that definitely didn't belong to my wife. I froze for a second, my brain trying to catch up with my ears. Then I heard it again, this time paired with a voice. A man's voice. My stomach turned, and suddenly I wasn't in a hurry to open that door. But I had to know. I had to see it with my own eyes, no matter how much I already hated the answer. When I pushed the door open, it felt like time slowed down. There they were, Sarah and some shirtless, wiry guy I'd never seen before, scrambling under the covers like teenagers caught by their parents. My blood boiled instantly. They didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. They just looked scared. Sarah stammered something. An excuse, a plea. I don't know. I didn't care. My eyes locked on the guy, who was trying to inch his way off the bed, probably hoping I wouldn't notice if he just slithered away like the snake he was. I noticed. Without thinking, I grabbed the first thing I could find, a heavy, brass candelabra from the dresser, and swung it like a baseball bat. The first hit caught him square in the shoulder, and he yelped like a wounded animal. He tried to bolt, but I wasn't done. He tripped over his own pants as he scrambled toward the door, and I swung again, catching his side this time. He finally managed to get past me and made a break for the stairs, but I chased him down like a man possessed. I don't even remember what I was yelling, but I know I wanted to make him regret every second he'd spent in my house. He stumbled out the front door, half-dressed, with me on his heels. He didn't stop running until he disappeared into the night, and I didn't stop shouting until my throat was raw. The adrenaline pumping through my veins made me feel like I could have chased him to the next state if I wanted to. When I finally turned back toward the house, the rage didn't go away. It just shifted. Now it was Sarah's turn. I walked back upstairs, and there she was, still sitting on the bed, clutching the sheets like they were some kind of shield. She started babbling the moment I walked in. "It's not what it looks like," she said. "Please let me explain." "Explain what?" I barked. "That you've been screwing another man in my house in my bed, while I'm out working hard for you?" She started crying, but I didn't care. She could have been bawling her eyes out, and it wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference to me. I told her to get dressed and get out of my sight. At first, she didn't move, just sat there sobbing and saying she was sorry. When I told her again, louder this time, she finally scrambled to her feet and started pulling on her clothes. She begged me to listen, to talk it through, but I wasn't having any of it. "You think I want to hear anything you've got to say after what I just walked in on?" I snapped. "You've got 5 minutes to get out of this house, or I'll throw you out myself." Sarah packed a small bag with trembling hands, still crying and pleading with me to forgive her. It only pissed me off more. "Don't you dare stand there and cry like you're the victim," I said. "You made your bed, Sarah, and now you can go lie in someone else's." She left that night, still begging for a second chance. I didn't look back. I couldn't. That wasn't the woman I married. Not anymore. As for her stuff, I kept my word. I packed up everything she left behind, every piece of clothing, every photo, every little trinket that reminded me of her, and I shipped it all to her parents' house. Let them deal with it. Let her deal with it. The house felt emptier after that, sure, but it also felt cleaner. After Sarah left that night, I thought I'd feel a sense of relief, like kicking her out would make the betrayal easier to stomach. But the thing is, it didn't. The anger stayed, simmering just beneath the surface, and every time I walked into the bedroom, it bubbled back up. I couldn't even bring myself to sleep in that bed. For the first week, I crashed on the couch. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her face, first the one I thought I knew, and then the one I saw that night, begging me for mercy. And then there was the embarrassment. I hadn't told anyone what happened yet, but I knew I had to. My parents had always loved Sarah, and my buddies thought we were some picture-perfect couple. Hell, even her parents thought we were rock solid. The humiliation of admitting I'd been blind to all of it was almost worse than the betrayal itself. Almost. It didn't take long for the calls to start. Sarah's first, of course. She didn't waste any time trying to fix things. I blocked her after the second voicemail. The first one was full of apologies, the kind you'd expect. I made a mistake. Please let me explain. I love you. I was stupid. But the second one? That one had a bit of bite to it. She started blaming me, saying I'd been gone too much, that she was lonely, that she didn't feel seen. I didn't even bother listening to the end of that one. She could take her excuses and shove them. Then came the calls from her family. Her mom, mostly, trying to mediate. She wanted me to meet with Sarah, to talk it through like adults. You've been married for 7 years, she said, like that was supposed to mean something. I told her the only thing I'd meet Sarah for was to finalize the divorce. That shut her up real quick. But the real gut punch? That came about 2 weeks later. I was packing up her stuff, ready to drop it at her parents' place as promised, when I found it. A journal. Now, I'm not proud of what I did next, but in my defense, I wasn't exactly in a calm, rational state of mind. I opened it, and what I found inside made me want to burn the thing right there in the driveway. It wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't even about the guy, though there were plenty of pages dedicated to him, full of details I'll spare you because they still make my blood boil. What really twisted the knife was how she wrote about me. She painted me like some absentee husband, like I was out there having the time of my life on business trips while she was stuck at home, miserable and neglected. She made me out to be the villain in her story, the reason she had no choice but to look for comfort elsewhere. No choice? She had no choice? That was her justification for screwing some random guy in my bed? I couldn't believe the gall of it. I threw the journal in the trash, but not before taking photos of a few pages. I wasn't sure why at the time. Maybe as proof, maybe as a reminder of who she really was. But it felt important. That night, I called my best friend, Mike. He'd been my rock through every other rough patch in my life, and I needed someone who wouldn't sugarcoat things. When I told him what happened, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You did the right thing kicking her out, man. But this isn't over. She's not just gonna let this go." I didn't know what he meant at the time, but I found out soon enough. A week later, I got served with papers, not divorce papers though, a restraining order. Apparently, Sarah claimed I was dangerous and had threatened her. She even listed the candelabra incident as evidence, conveniently leaving out the part where I had every right to be furious. That's when I realized this wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. It was about her trying to rewrite the narrative, to paint herself as the victim and me as the bad guy. She wanted to protect her image, and she didn't care if she had to drag me through the mud to do it. So there I was, sitting in my lawyer's office, staring down the barrel of a legal battle I never asked for. I could have caved, could have let her have her restraining order and walked away. But I didn't. I wasn't about to let her turn this around on me, not after what she'd done. Mike was right. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sitting in my lawyer's office, staring at the restraining order, I felt something snap inside me. I wasn't the kind of man to roll over and let someone like Sarah rewrite reality. She'd already shattered our marriage, humiliated me in my own house, and now she wanted to paint me as the monster. If she thought I was just going to sit there and take it, she didn't know me at all. My lawyer, Mike's cousin Paul, was no stranger to messy divorces. He sat across from me, flipping through the paperwork with a frown. "It's weak," he said, "but it's not baseless. She's using that candelabra incident as her foundation. You sure you didn't hit her?" "Her? No," I said, shaking my head. "The guy, though? Yeah, I went after him. I'd do it again, too." Paul nodded slowly. "That's what they're banking on, that you'll come across as hot-headed and volatile. They'll try to spin it into a pattern of aggression. Well, they're about to find out what aggression really looks like," I muttered. "What do we do?" "First, you keep your cool," Paul said. "Don't give her any ammo. Second, we gather evidence. If she's trying to play the victim, we show the court who the real liar is. Evidence." I hadn't thought much about it, but then it hit me, the journal. The pages I'd photographed were still on my phone, and those weren't just scribbled thoughts. They were confessions. Dates, times, places where she'd met her lover. Hell, she even detailed how they started linking up, while I was out of town trying to secure that promotion. I handed my phone to Paul and let him scroll through the pictures. His eyebrows shot up as he read. "Jesus Christ," he said. "This isn't just an affair. This is a playbook." "Exactly," I said. "She wants to drag me through the mud? Let's see how she likes it when the truth comes out." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Paul filed a response to the restraining order, including the journal entries as evidence of Sarah's infidelity and her attempts to manipulate the narrative. But I didn't just sit around waiting for court dates. I started digging into Sarah's life. If she wanted to play dirty, I was ready to roll in the mud. It didn't take long to find something. One of my buddies from college, Dave, worked security at a fancy hotel downtown. I remembered Sarah mentioning she'd met her friend there for drinks a few times, so I gave Dave a call. After some convincing and a promise to cover his bar tab for a month, he checked the security footage from the dates in her journal. Sure enough, there she was, cozying up to her boy toy in the lobby, heading up to a room together. Dave sent me the clips, and I forwarded them straight to Paul. "This is gold," he said when he saw them. "It proves she's been lying through her teeth. If she's trying to claim emotional abuse, this kills her credibility." I wasn't done yet. I started thinking about that guy, the one I'd chased out of my house. I didn't even know his name, but I remembered enough of his face to know I wouldn't forget it anytime soon. So I went looking. Small-town gossip spreads fast, and it didn't take long to find out who he was. Turned out, the guy wasn't just some random fling. He was a coworker of Sarah's, married, with kids. I tracked down his wife, Claire. She deserved to know what was going on just as much as I did. When I called her, she sounded confused. But when I explained who I was and what had happened, her confusion turned to stunned silence. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm sure," I said. "I've got proof. If you want to meet, I'll show you everything." We met at a coffee shop later that day. I showed her the photos, the journal pages, the hotel footage. She didn't say much, just sat there staring at the evidence with tears streaming down her face. Finally, she looked up at me and said, "Thank you. I needed to know." What I didn't expect was what happened next. Claire wasn't just heartbroken. She was furious. And she wasn't the type to sit back and take it either. She offered to testify on my behalf, to expose her husband's role in all of this. I didn't ask her to, she volunteered. By the time the court date rolled around, I was locked and loaded. Sarah's lawyer tried to paint me as an unstable, vengeful husband, but every time they made a claim, we countered with cold, hard facts. The journal entries, the security footage, Claire's testimony. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. The judge saw through Sarah's lies almost immediately. Not only was her restraining order denied, but the evidence we presented opened the door for my countersuit. She tried to ruin me, but all she'd done was dig her own grave. When the hearing ended, Sarah wouldn't even look at me. She left the courtroom in silence, her lawyer trailing behind her. I felt a surge of vindication, but it was bittersweet. Winning the battle didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't fix the gaping hole she'd left in my life. But it was a start. And for the first time since that night, I felt like I was back in control. The courtroom victory was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. Sure, Sarah had been humiliated, her lies exposed for everyone to see, but that didn't erase what she'd done. And it sure as hell didn't stop me from wanting to make sure she and her boy toy got exactly what they deserved. After the hearing, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah and her lover weren't done trying to screw me over. People like them don't just go quietly. So I stayed on guard, waiting for their next move. It didn't take long. A few days after the court case, Claire, the wife of Sarah's lover, called me. She sounded panicked, her voice shaking so badly I could barely make out what she was saying. "You need to come to my place," she said. "It's about him. About them." When I got to Claire's house, she was pacing the living room, her face pale and her hands trembling. She handed me her phone without a word. On the screen was a series of text messages between Sarah and her husband, messages she'd found on his backup cloud account. And let me tell you, these weren't just flirty little exchanges. They were plotting. The text showed Sarah and her lover discussing how to get back at me and Claire. They joked about making false allegations, talked about stirring up trouble at work, and even threw around ideas about dragging my name through the mud online. They didn't care who they hurt as long as they got their revenge. "Can you believe this?" Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're trying to ruin us." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was war. "Send me those messages," I told her. "Every single one." With the texts in hand, I went straight to Paul, my lawyer. He read through them with a grim expression. "This is bad," he said, "but it's also good. They're giving us everything we need to bury them." We didn't wait. Paul filed for a cease and desist against both Sarah and her lover, citing harassment and defamation. He also started preparing a lawsuit for damages, just in case they were stupid enough to keep pushing. But I wasn't about to sit back and let the legal system handle everything. This was personal. I started digging into Sarah's life even deeper. I found out she'd been lying about more than just the affair. Credit card charges started popping up, luxury items I'd never seen, hotel stays I'd never been part of, and mysterious withdrawals from our joint account. She'd been bleeding me dry for months while I was out working to support us. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. And her lover? Oh, he wasn't squeaky clean either. Turns out, he had a habit of dipping into company funds to fund his extracurricular activities. A quick conversation with Dave, my buddy at the hotel, confirmed that he'd paid for their little rendezvous with a corporate card. I made sure to pass that info along to his employer. Let's just say he didn't last long after that. But the real fireworks started when Claire decided to take matters into her own hands. One night, she called me, her voice crackling with determination. "We need to confront them," she said, "face to face." At first, I wasn't sure. What good would it do to confront people who clearly had no shame? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized Claire was right. This wasn't just about making a point, it was about taking back control. So we hatched a plan. We waited until Sarah and her lover were meeting at a local bar they frequented, one of those dimly lit places where no one asks questions. Claire had tracked his location through a family app they'd shared, and sure enough, there they were. We walked in together, side by side, and the second Sarah saw me, her face went white. Her lover, on the other hand, tried to play it cool. He leaned back in his chair like he owned the place, smirking at me like I was some kind of joke. "Well, if it isn't the angry husband," he said, raising his glass. "Come to throw another tantrum?" I didn't say a word. I just walked over to their table, leaned in close, and said, "You've got 5 seconds to stand up and leave, or we're going to have a real problem." He laughed, but it was nervous. "You think I'm scared of you?" "No," I said, smiling coldly. "I think you're too stupid to be scared, but you're about to learn." Before he could respond, Claire stepped forward, holding up her phone. "You want to talk about stupid?" she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Maybe you can explain these." She hit play on the recording of his texts to Sarah, her voice dripping with venom. "Let's see what the bar thinks about a couple of homewreckers plotting to ruin people's lives." The bar went dead silent. Heads turned. People started whispering. Sarah's lover shot out of his chair, grabbing for the phone, but Claire stepped back, holding it just out of reach. "Not so fun when you're the one under the spotlight, huh?" she said. Sarah tried to play the victim, of course. "This isn't fair," she whined. "You don't understand." "I understand plenty," I cut in. "You're a liar. A cheat. And now, everyone knows it." The manager came over, trying to defuse the situation, but the damage was done. Sarah and her lover slinked out of the bar, their reputations in tatters. Claire and I stayed for a drink, toasting to a small but satisfying victory. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for the first time, I felt like I was one step ahead. And that felt good. The courtroom victory should have been the end of it. I should have been able to move on, knowing I'd stood my ground and refused to let Sarah rewrite the narrative. But life doesn't work like that, does it? The aftermath of betrayal is never clean. The damage doesn't stop just because you've won one battle. About a month after the court case, I was finally starting to rebuild my life. The house was quieter, sure, but it felt like my space again. I'd replaced the bed, donated most of the furniture Sarah had picked out, and started hitting the gym again to burn off the lingering anger. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was clawing my way back to normal. That's when the phone calls started. It wasn't Sarah this time. It was him, her lover. At first, it was just a single missed call from an unknown number. I didn't think much of it, but then it happened again and again. Every time I answered, the line went dead. I started getting texts, too. Anonymous numbers, saying things like, "You think this is over? And you don't know what you've started." I ignored them, blocked every number. But the messages kept coming. Whoever it was, they weren't just angry, they were obsessed. And they weren't shy about letting me know it. One night, I was coming home from the gym when I noticed a car parked across the street from my house. It was dark, but I could see someone sitting inside. I stood there for a minute, staring at the car, my gym bag slung over my shoulder. The driver didn't move. I wasn't about to let some coward intimidate me, so I walked straight up to the car. The moment I got close, the engine roared to life, and they sped off before I could get a good look at the plates. I told myself it was just paranoia. Maybe I was overthinking it, letting the stress of everything mess with my head. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't random. Someone was watching me. Things escalated quickly after that. One morning, I woke up to find my car keyed from hood to trunk. The word liar was scrawled in deep, jagged scratches across the driver's side door. I called the police, but they didn't have much to go on. No cameras, no witnesses, no leads. That same night, the messages got worse. One text read, "You ruined her life. Now I'm going to ruin yours." Another simply said, "Sleep with one eye open." That was it. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for whoever this was to make their next move. I called Mike, who showed up within the hour with a cooler of beer and his old Glock. "We'll figure this out," he said. "Nobody messes with my boy." We set up a rotation, taking turns watching the house overnight. For a week, nothing happened. Then, one night around 3 a.m., I heard a noise outside, like someone trying to jimmy the lock on the back door. I grabbed the bat I kept next to the couch and motioned for Mike to follow me. We crept toward the kitchen, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring. I yanked the door open just as the intruder was about to step inside. It was him, the guy from that night, the one I'd chased out of my house. He looked disheveled, desperate, like a man on the edge of sanity. His eyes widened when he saw me, but before he could bolt, I swung the bat, catching him in the ribs. He let out a grunt and staggered back, clutching his side. "Not so fast," I growled, stepping out onto the porch. Mike was right behind me, his Glock trained on the guy. "Don't shoot," the man screamed, his hands in the air. I just wanted to talk." "Talk?" I barked. "You've been harassing me for weeks, and now you break into my house? You're lucky I don't bury you right here." He started babbling, words tumbling out in a panicked mess. "She told me it was your fault," he said. "She said you were abusive, that you were ruining her life. She promised me she'd leave you, but then you humiliated her in court, and now she won't even answer my calls. I lost everything for her, my wife, my kids, my job, and it's all your fault." I laughed bitterly. "My fault? You destroyed your own life, pal. All I did was throw out the trash." That set him off. He lunged at me, but before he could get close, Mike stepped in and pressed the barrel of the Glock to his temple. "I wouldn't," Mike said coldly. The guy froze, his face pale as a ghost. "Please," he whispered. "I've got nothing left." "Then leave," I said. "Get out of my sight, and don't ever come near me again." He stumbled away into the night, clutching his ribs. Mike and I watched until he disappeared, then called the cops. They picked him up a few blocks away, breaking into another house. Turns out, I wasn't his only target. He'd been spiraling ever since Sarah ghosted him. He confessed to everything, including the texts and the vandalism. The next day, I got a call from Claire, his now estranged wife. "He's been arrested," she said. "And Sarah? She's moved to another state. She's not coming back." That should have been the end of it. But as I hung up the phone, I felt a strange chill. For weeks, my life had been chaos, a storm of betrayal, revenge, and violence. And now, just like that, the storm was over. But the scars? They'd stay forever.